Just getting all my screens ready. Okay, so I'm going to go through, I only have about a half an hour. I'm hoping to give time for you to practice a little bit at the end, but we may or may not have that time. But I'll demo what you can do, why you'd want to do this, go through an exemplar, and then I'll slowly go through either one or two examples. My first one is sciencey, and my second one would be a math example. So that's our plan. Sort of why you would do this, there's, I typed out at least three main reasons. One is it's really nice for formative practice. You can build questions that the students can do over and over again, and every time they're new numbers. So my future example is, figuring out the length of the hypotenuse. So you could write a whole bunch of questions. The other two sides are different lengths every time a student does that question. So they can practice. For you, you made one question, but for the student, it's an infinite number of practice problems, which can be very handy. Obviously, right now, it's nice for online assessment if questions have different numbers for every student, so they can't text each other the answer when they're doing an assessment. They could help each other, but every student has different numbers. Okay? And then last, this could be useful for in-class assignments. You're giving a test in class in Chromebooks. It's so easy to look at somebody else's screen on a Chromebook, but if their numbers are different than yours, you don't even care if their eyes are wandering while you're doing a quiz. So I'm going to run through a question. This is one I actually used yesterday on a test. So this is what the question looks like, and I'll go through slowly how to do this. So this is not teaching you, this is just what you can do. So my question is, determine the concentration of hydroxide. If you scroll to the second sentence, it says the solution was made up from, and I've defined a variable. I haven't put in how many grams, but I've defined my M variable will be how many grams that the student will get of magnesium hydroxide. And then the volume, I put a number in, I didn't make that a variable. And I tell my students to give their answer to 3 decimal places. Down below, you have to tell D2L, how do you figure out the answer? So the answer for this question is take this M variable, divide it by the molar mass, which is 58.33, and then double it. Because there's 2 hydroxides in magnesium hydroxide. So you have to put a formula in. Unfortunately, this formula box, when you're using it, you can't make it bigger. So it's been hard to show colleagues. You just have to look really carefully, but we'll go through this shortly. This answer precision is kind of an incorrect use of the word. It means how many decimal places should be in your answer. So that's how you want to use that precision. You can let D2L mark a range of answers correct if you want. In multi-step questions in science, you might let the students round the last decimal incorrectly, one higher or one lower, and still mark it right. Then way at the bottom, you have to define your variable. So I've defined this M variable is going to be between 0.61 and 0.78 to 2 decimal places, and it will randomly pick numbers 1/100th apart from each other. What this looks like to the reader is this question. So I previewed the question, and D2L randomly picked 0.73 as the mass of magnesium hydroxide in this version of the question, and it computes the answer. Now I had to make sure that the correct sig figs, when you use these numbers, match up with what I told the students. So I've told them, do 3 decimal places, don't think about how many sig figs, I'm telling you, to try to make sure they're not getting wrong answers because of sig figs. This is a version, these are 5 different versions of this question. So Michaela got 0.72 grams, Caitlin got 0.68, Aaron got 0.69, Eric got 0.75, and Dylan got 0.62. So every student had a different number, and every student had a different answer on this quiz. And this is just 5 of the whole class. So this, hopefully you can see, is really, particularly with online, this is so handy. Eric can't text Dylan what the answer is. He could help him, but seeing his answer is totally useless. So I just want to show a benefit of using this in a formative quiz, and then I'm going to flip and do a couple, hopefully 2 demos. Okay, so you should be able to see my D2L page now. So I just need to go back to quizzes. This is left from where it was at the end of my first presentation. So I made a chapter 6 formative quiz. I'm going to show you what it looks like and then show you the benefit, the student results and the data that I got. So this is a 7-question quiz, all arithmetic. And okay, so I'm just going to go into one question. I had to go into edit mode to show you what this is going to look like. So what is the pH of a solution with a hydroxide concentration of, and I make the base of the concentration a variable, and I make the exponent a variable. So every student is just getting a totally different number, and they have to calculate pH. I had to do the formula to solve for pH. So if we have this negative log of the concentration piece, and then you have to take 14 minus the negative log. You end up with the power of hydroxide, and you have to convert it to pH. I had to 2 decimal place this, and then I've defined my variables. The exponent, I clearly want it to be whole numbers. So I said 2 to 5 with no decimal places in steps of 1. So I'm forcing D2L to pick 2, 3, 4, or 5 as the possible exponent. The base will have a decimal place to it. And there's, again, 7 other questions similar to this. And I want to show you the data. I assigned this as a quiz and gave them unlimited attempts because I wanted them to practice over and over again. And most of my students used it as I would want them to. So if you look at Aiden, he did it twice, he got 85, then 100. Brandon, who does struggle a little bit, he got under 30%, then in the 70s, and then finally got 100 and quit trying again. But it's not the same boring quiz over and over again. He had different numbers, so he couldn't just remember what he did before. He had to recalculate it each time and made sure he showed mastery. Several students got 100 right away. Chloe got 86 and stopped. Dylan did it a couple of times, was in the 50s and the 70s. Another person was in the 40s, then got 100. Kimberly did it 4 times until finally she showed mastery. So I think this could be really handy for formative practice. The math department does their formal reviews at the end, and this could totally be integrated into the formal reviews that you do if you wanted to do it digitally. I kind of always viewed your formal reviews as a great tool and kind of a bribe to make students practice before the unit test. And this, again, would be a bribe or encouragement to do before the unit test. Again, another student started in the 40s and ended up with 100 with some practice. Okay. So let's flip into some examples on how do you actually make this yourself. What's really handy when you're starting is to take a test you already have and just copy and paste that question right into D2L. So I'm going to do a Science 10 question, but I've already put a variable in. How many moles are in so many grams of hydrogen gas? And we're going to turn this into a full arithmetic question. I'm just going to switch into my PD Demo Day 2 quiz for this demo. So I'm into a demo quiz I've already made. I'm not going to go through how to make quizzes. That's not the intention of this video. I'm going to add a new question. And then you got to go way to the bottom. I know until this year, I never went under new all the way down, but the second lowest one is an arithmetic question, 2 plus 2. That's what I want to select. Okay. In chemistry, we've been titling all of these so we can find them again. So our convention has been pick the chapter, then use a code for difficulty. So I'm going to make an easy knowledge question, and this is going to be calculate moles. Okay. of hydrogen gas, okay? Just so we can find, you know, if we had 100 questions, we need to be able to find this one to use it again, okay? This is optional. Here's the question section. So I've pasted in my question, or this is where you would type it out. How many moles are in so many grams of hydrogen gas? When I build my questions, I like to go to the top and then the very bottom. Okay, so I don't do them in order. I write my question, I define my variables, and then I like to scroll to the very bottom, which is where you define your variables, the parameters. Okay? It always gives you two variables, but you often don't want to. So I'm going to delete the second one because I only have one variable, A. And don't put the brackets around your A when you define it. You only put the brackets around your variable when you use it. Okay? If I don't delete this second blank variable, I will get an error and it will not work. So I deleted that variable. I got to scroll back down. So this is A, and I'm going to make it between 0.5 grams and 0.9 grams. Now I want to have 2 sig figs. So I want the numbers given to students to have 2 decimal places. That'll give me my 2 sig figs. Okay. And I want it to randomly pick numbers that are 100th apart from each other. So D2L will pick everything between 0.50 to 0.90. All of those 2 decimal place numbers will be possibilities for students. So the odds of 2 students getting the same number is fairly low. Okay. Now I'm going to go back up and work my way down. I've got my question, description I don't need, formula, how do you get the answer? Okay. Well, I want to take the variable, the grams, and divide it by the molar mass. That'll give me my moles. I have to use the curly bracket to say use the variable. So use variable A, and then I need to divide it by the molar mass of hydrogen gas, which is 2.02. Don't put equals, don't put any spaces in, don't use an X for multiply, you'll get errors. Okay? Now you've got this little question mark, which is your best friend when you're learning. If you hit the question mark, you get hints in the syntax. Okay, now, so you can use, it tells you how to do powers. You've got absolute value, cos, sine, tan, square, logs, both base 10 and base E. And then you've got shortcuts for pi and Euler's number if you want to use those. So use this a lot to remind yourself of what you can do and how you should enter it. Again, it tells you to use the star for multiplication and the slash for division. The first time I went to do this, I put an X in for multiply and kept getting errors until I realized. So I have take the grams, divide by 2.02. You kind of have to think of what range of answers you're going to get. And for this question, I've set it up so that they should get 2 decimal place answers. To get the 2 sig figs, they're going to need 2 decimal places. Now, this test is really handy. I can hit test, see if I get an error, and see if I get the right range of answers that I want. So I'll hit test. D2L randomly picked a mass for me, did my formula, and got 0.28. Okay, that's just what I wanted. 2 sig figs in my A variable, 2 sig figs in my answer, so my 2 decimal place works. It's fine. Okay, so that worked well. And I think everything should be done. Okay, so I have my descriptor, I have my question, I have my formula, 2 decimal places, my variable, I'm all set. Now, a big, powerful part of this is making a whole bunch of questions. You can put some on quizzes, some on tests, some on formative. You can copy the question, save and copy this question and tweak it and make a whole new question. So that's what I'll do next. And now that I've done the hard work, it's going to take me 20 or 1 minute to make another question. So I'm going to go save and copy. Okay. That little flash is a new question. Okay. And I'm going to make this question nitrogen gas instead of hydrogen gas. How many moles are in so many grams? And I'll make this nitrogen gas, 2 decimal places. There, nitrogen spelled right. My formula, I just needed to be nitrogen gas, so that's 28.02, verified by Karen Roberts. Okay, I can leave these same numbers down here, I'll hit test just to make sure the decimal places and sig figs work. Oh, and I'm only getting one sig fig. So based on the numbers I've picked, I want another decimal place. So I want 3 decimal places. I'll hit test again, and now I should get 2 sig figs in my answer. Yeah, and now I'm getting 2 sig figs. Now my question's good to go. So what was I? Barely a minute to modify this question. Okay. Maybe the first question I put on a formative quiz, and the second one I put on a test. So you can repeat really quickly. I'll save this, and with, I think I have time, I'll do one math example, and then I'll give you a chance to ask me some questions, or maybe try to make one yourself. So this is the quick math question I made up. Determine the longest side of a right angle triangle, and I list the 2 short sides. And I tell them the units and how many decimal places. So this might be on a quiz you have already. Copy. And I want to make a new question. Arithmetic. And I'm going to paste it right in. But now I want to manipulate it. This is an arithmetic. Okay, I don't want 1.1 to be in my question. I want that to be a variable. I have to use the curly brackets, so don't use the square brackets, you'll get an error. Curly brackets, and I'll make A one of my short sides, and instead of 3.3, I'll make B the other side. I'll scroll to the bottom, define my A and B, and I don't want to put any variable. I don't want to put the brackets around the variables when I define them. So I'll keep it simple. 1 to 5 to 1 decimal place in tenths. And I'll be boring. I'll go 1 to 5 as the other side. To a tenth. So the 2 sides will be between 1 and 5. So to solve for this, so we're using c squared equals a squared plus b squared. So I'm going to need to take the square root, but it's built in. SQR lets me take the square root of something. So I want to take the square root, I'm doing a round bracket, of a, so curly bracket a variable, close the a bracket, and I need to square a, so the power of a, plus, I need to take b and square b, and then take the square root of the whole thing. And I'll do that to 1 decimal place. My a and b have a decimal place, so I want my answer to be to 1 decimal place. Let's test this. So it picked A side, B side, calculated C side. I'm not going to double check the math. It's bigger than A and B, so it's a good sign that I probably have done this right. I know, does Carmen have her graphing calculator to make sure we're doing this right? Good. Good math teacher has it within reach. I'm going to assume D2L didn't mess up.
Yeah, no, it's good. 5 points. It's 5.03. So 5 to 1 decimal place is 5.0.
So now you have a question. You can put the same question on a formative quiz, put it on a regular quiz or a test, and it's a different question every time. You're seeing, do they know how to calculate the hypotenuse in a right angle triangle? So you build this once and use it over and over again. You could write another question for the shortest side and write another question for the B side. And once you've written these 3 arithmetic questions, all you would do is manipulate these. Okay. Last, I can make this a little harder if you wanted to make them play with units. I'm going to go save and copy. So now we're into a new question, determine the longest side. The 2 shorter sides are A meters, and I'm going to say B centimeters. So they're going to have to convert. Give your answer in meters. Okay. Now I'm going to want to keep the B side between 1 and 3 meters. So I'm going to have to So I'll make this between 100 and 500 centimeters. I'll make this to no decimal places in jumps of 10. So A is now in meters, B is now in centimeters. I have to change my formula and take B and divide it by 100. Hopefully that makes sense. I just made the B variable centimeters. I changed its range to centimeters, and I updated the formula to convert it back to meters. This test button is great. I mess up half the time, but I find my error when I hit test. So this picked 1.6 meters, 490 centimeters, did the math, got 5.2 meters as the C side. Again, that seems to make sense. I won't make Carmen do the math again. And I very quickly wrote a question that is slightly more difficult than the first. And it took me less than a minute to write the second question. And again, the save and copy is incredibly powerful. So there's so many questions in science, calculating number of moles. You could, in 10 minutes, probably make 20 different questions of calculating moles by going save and copy, and have a nice database of questions. You know, every year or every class could have a slightly different question. So that concludes my demo. So if you want to ask me questions, or if you want to try to build an arithmetic question right now, I would pick something really simple. You could start with a question which is just adding two numbers or dividing two numbers, and make sure everything works and the format is right. And then I would roll into copying and pasting questions. I helped David Gears. He took a whole paper quiz that he had, copied and pasted it in. We turned them to arithmetic questions, and it did not take him long to build a quiz. And then as you get better, you just start building the questions right in D2L from the top of your head. So I will stop the recording, and open the floor to questions.